Bill, thank you. Do you take Target as a bellwether for consumer spending on discretionary items here?
Well, welcome to the wacky world of retail where somebody does good and somebody does bad, and the rest of us guess what happened. Target, it's a really interesting story to see Target and Walmart release so close together with such what, at least on the surface, looks like different results. But when you peel it back, it was actually quite similar. Walmart's growth, as everybody knows, came from their food business, and Target talked about struggles in their general merchandise, hardline apparel areas that, as you just told everybody. If you peel it back and look at Walmart, that was negative in their release too, those categories. And so, this is the time when the Walmart folks are real glad to be selling a lot of food, and all that food growth is inflation. And so, by and large, what we're seeing is promotional activity from the consumer that's driven in part by the consumer and their interest in being wary with their spending, but in large part being driven by these just absurd inventory growth that both Walmart and Target and other retailers had that they're having to liquidate, and you can see that in their gross margins.
So how do you square this with the better retail sales number we got for October and not as bad numbers, say, for Lowe's, Home Depot yesterday? These weren't disasters on consumer spending.
No, I think you're going to see retailers and categories specifically that are going to do quite well and continue to do quite well. I think home improvement, with all the home equity values that have been built up, is a really good place if you're going to be betting on retail. Food, particularly when food inflation is double digit, is going to continue to drive traffic and volume all across the board for food retailers. And that's why Walmart's doing so well. Everything else is going to be purely promotional because the consumer's going to be a little leery, and there's just a lot of inventory in those categories.
So if inflation is really starting to hit the consumer hard, which is basically what Target told us that happened sort of from September to October, we talked to Brian Niccol, the CEO of Chipotle, yesterday on this show. Belle, listen to what he said about it, where inflation is headed.
We anticipate probably roughly still 10% inflation in the fourth quarter. And, we continue to see elevated pricing as it relates to, beef, dairy, tortillas, oil. So the good news is it's plateaued, but it's still at a fairly elevated level. And, that's going to continue to put pressure throughout our supply chain.
For all those people excited about the fact that inflation rates are starting to come down, not so much in food. If you listen to that, still stubbornly high. What's that going to mean for consumer spending?
Well, I think you're right, and I agree with him. You can see it in Walmart's release too. Their food business was up, but their gross margin was down, so they haven't even priced in all of their cost increases yet. And I think that eventually those things will have to work their way through the system at retail and restaurants. And so I expect to see things, continue at a high level in the fourth quarter and probably start to turn down into the first and second quarter of next year.
So given the warnings we got from Target, and we're starting to get from some others, and you can see some of that in the retail sales report, department stores were flat, apparel, these are not hot areas of spending right now. Who else is at risk for the fourth quarter?
Oh, gosh. If you're a broad lines retailer like Kohl's, Penny's, or department store, those guys are going to have really tough because discretionary sales are challenged. Supply chains left us after having, empty supply chains. They've now left us with a glut in some of those categories, and you don't have food to drive your business. Those would be the ones I'd be worried about.
Yeah, Kohl's reports on Thursday. Bill Simon. Bill, thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarah. See you.
Appreciate your perspective. Former head of Walmart U.S.